Waco is a miniseries made by Paramount. It came out in 2018, and I guess they sold it to Netflix. I watched it on Netflix. It stars Michael Shannon, Taylor Kitsch, Andrea Riseborough, Shea Wiggum, and a few others you can see in there. But this movie is about Waco. The standoff at with the Branch Davidians. I didn't know anything going into this series. I didn't know anything about like the Waco real life, the standoff. I knew that there was a standoff in Waco, Texas, and that's where when people say it's going to be like Waco, that's what they meant. They meant this story, but I didn't know anything going into it. So this is a 6-episode series. The first one pretty much sets up with a time jump forward with the ATF sort of storming their compound. And then we cut back to prior, like a year or so. And we get a sort of groundwork of all different characters. There's David Koresh. He is the leader of the Branch Davidians. He's created this compound paradise a few miles away from Waco, and because he owns the land, I believe. And in his compound, this commune, he's got all these different families and their wives and kids, and there's a few of them. I think in real life it was around 100 or more. And the reason why the ATF are after him is because of polygamy charges, statutory rape, and weapons. So the ATF, the first episode sort of sets up that the ATF is becoming obsolete and the FBI keeps getting bigger budgets, and we also explore the other half of the characters. There's two halves to this series. The first one half of the characters is David Koresh and all of his sort of lieutenants, his wives, and his son. And then the other half are the FBI negotiators. You got Gary, he is the compassionate one. Mitchell is the sort of gung-ho, guns a-blazing. And then the person in charge of the Waco sort of negotiations is Tony Prince. So those three are sort of the main characters of the law enforcement side. So the first two episodes sort of give us flashbacks leading up to why the ATF, the FBI, are going after this guy. They basically want to look good. They even call it Operation Showtime, so they can make it a flashy takedown of this cult leader. They're trying to demonize him and make him look like a terrible person. And David just wants to live in peace, I guess. So the first two episodes are kind of setting up everything until the third episode, in which they have their first shootout. The third episode has like the big action sequence in which the Branch Davidians and the ATF go at it with guns. From then on, episode 3 to 6 are about the long, tense standoff. So let's get into what I like. The show has a really good character acting. Like, everyone does a really good job acting-wise. I love all of the FBI guys. Michael Shannon does a great job, Shea Wiggum, and the guy who plays Tony Prince. Taylor Kitsch does a really good job as David Koresh. And there's a few other actors in there like Melissa Benoist, and there's the dad from Thoroughbreds. He's also in there too. Other than that, though, there are a lot of flaws. I'm gonna have to start getting into them. Basically, I didn't know anything about this, the real life equivalent, but there are some sequences in the show that just didn't feel real to me, and I was trying to figure it out. But basically, there's two books that this series is based off of. There's one by David Thibodeau. He is a sort of wanderer who bumps into them at a bar, and he plays with them, and he's sort of their newest recruit for the Branch Davidian compound. And he's like this younger guy. He wrote a book because he was a survivor of the Waco incident. And then the other side is Gary's book. So it's sort of, you think it'd be like a balanced sort of thing. You got a book from a Branch Davidian and a book from the FBI negotiator. However, there are some sequences where they felt like they really tried really hard to make David Koresh seem like a nice guy. There's an undercover officer that gets introduced, and he gets he starts drinking the Kool-Aid, basically. And there's a scene where David's like, someone has committed a sin, I'm gonna have to whoop them. And then he makes everyone eat ice cream. And there's another scene where he's having sex with one of his wives, and he says, I have to stop because I'm enjoying myself. And it just seemed really awkward. And I'm thinking, these scenes, they kind of go out of their way to make him look like a regular guy. And then after watching the series, I went on Wikipedia to do a little, light reading, and there are just so many things that the series leaves out. This series feels really shallow. I mean, when you watch it in the moment, you're riveted because it's, if you don't know anything, it's like, wow. But when you look up all of the events before Waco and during and after, you realize that the Branch Davidians are not as clean cut as the series tries to paint them out to be. For example, David had a bit of a rivalry with another guy in his group, and they were like fighting. No, it wasn't David. It was David's mentor had a rivalry with another guy. They're both like different sect leaders of the Branch Davidians, and they were going at it until one of them got arrested and put in jail. So then one of them succeeded, then he passed it on to David. And then the show only shows 3 wives, and David had 14. And he had many kids, not the 2 in the show. And the whole, I'm enjoying sex, I have to stop. David has one of his doctrines is that he's the only one allowed to have sex with any of the women. And he would take wives that are already married, and he would take younger wives, and pretty much he could be the only one that gets to have sex. And, for them to show him not enjoying sex, it felt really false. And then, of course, there was the whole violence aspect was toned down. After the shootout, they show a couple casualties on both sides, but the number was like double. And there's more people in the compound. There was people living outside the compound as well. And the series just feels a little shallow after the fact. But even before I read all the stuff on Wikipedia, the show just felt a little off in some areas. They tried to make the Branch Davidians look like we just want to live on our land, but they didn't show a lot of stuff. For example, in real life, the police never used helicopters to shoot at them like they do in the show. Also, they didn't show the 50 caliber weapons. That's the reason why the FBI showed up with tanks in the show, because the Branch Davidians, they also had a fake gun store, and it was a front, so they could get a lot of weapon deliveries, and then they were turning semi-automatic weapons into automatic weapons. But they had a whole armory. And that's the reason why the tanks showed. The tanks weren't just a show of force. They were because the Branch Davidians also had like heavy weaponry. And then there's other things like that. And then of course the ending's a little bit controversial because we don't still know what happened at the end there. But overall, Waco, you can watch it. It's quick to watch. It's only 6 episodes, 45 minutes each. It's the equivalent of watching 3 90-minute movies. Acting's decent enough for the most part. Lots of tension. But overall, it doesn't really dive deep into like the actual weirdness of the whole situation. You can watch the series and be like, you can sympathize with either side, but I just feel like the show tried to go too easy on the whole Branch Davidian sect, and it was just kind of weird. So overall, Waco, you can watch it if you want to, but it's not amazing. That's my thoughts about that miniseries.